What's up, YouTube? Just doing things here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Ruger Wrangler. This is the modern manufacturer 22 long rifle revolver of the original 22 or the original Ruger Wrangler. This is a nice little treasure trove of a Chinese pot metal firearm, and it's actually really fun to shoot, and I really enjoy it. But today we're going to be doing a detailed disassembly and reassembly on this guy. Some of the tools you're going to need: T15 Torx bit on a bit driver or a T-handle, whatever your preference is, and I recommend a T-handle, but this is all I have. A flathead screwdriver, preferably with a smaller bit, a punch that'll fit the holes or just to push pins out. I have two roll pin punches. One's going to retain the mainspring, and then the other one is potentially going to help me take the pressure off the spring for the trigger pin. And then I have a pliers in case I need to do some plying, and then a glass container just to hold on my tidbits. So let's check clear and let's get to the disassembly. This is 6 cylinders. Hammer forward, open the side gate, and I'm going to count 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I count 7 because that allows me to know that I overcounted and all the cylinders are clear. So from here, we're going to do a basic field strip, which is just cylinder and cylinder pin. To do that, we have a button here. We're going to push this button up, and this is the latch for your cylinder pin. Lift that up with your middle finger, pinch the end of the cylinder pin with your index and thumb, slide it out just like that, and then tilt the gun sideways, and our cylinder is going to fall out. Set that aside, drop our pin in there, and we're going to close our side gate. I'm going to remove this guy here. This tube is your ejection rod assembly. So we have the tube, a flathead fastener, your ejection rod, and then a spring that returns it. To remove that, this obviously we'll put a little bit of thumb tension because there's a spring in there, and a flathead to take this fastener out. There's not a lot of spring tension in here. It's enough to make it shoot across your desk, but not onto the floor, across the room. So I took the fastener out. We don't need to do that. And then this whole assembly just comes apart just like that. We have our spring and our ejection rod, the ejection rod tube, and then our fastener. And we're just going to take our fastener here. We're going to drop it right back in here so we don't lose it. What we're going to do now is we're going to take the grips off. All you need is a flathead screwdriver. Loosen that up a little ways. Gun up. Set one aside. We'll tilt it over to get the other one off. Just like that. We'll leave the screw in there, or the fastener in there. We'll just set that screw to the other side of the grip. I'll go over there. Alright, so I know I mentioned this. There's a few things we can take apart that we're not going to. There's a spring and detent. There's a spring and detent in the hammer. We have the main spring assembly. We have the firing pin behind the transfer bar here. It's just a captive, or it's just a nut, and then that'll come out, and then your firing pin will come out, and there's a spring in there. And then there's also the cylinder pin latch that we're not going to take apart. You can take them apart if you want to. I don't have the tools for these two, the firing pin and the latch, and I have taken this apart, and I will tell you, without a vise, which I don't have yet, it is a royal pain to get it back together. So we're just going to leave that be. So now what we're going to do is we are going to remove the spring tension off the trigger spring and the main spring assembly. The trigger spring has 2 arms. It's a single spring with 2 arms, and we have an arm here over this pin, and we have another arm here over this pin, and then we're going to stick something in here, a roll pin punch, to get the tension off. Get the tension off, pull the hammer back, and it's going to expose a hole here at the bottom. We're going to take a roll pin punch about the size of that hole. We're going to slide it in there just a little bit, right about like that, so it'll allow us to clear the gun, and then we're going to pull the trigger. and that's going to release the hammer. And now you can see the mainspring assembly is free floating in there. To remove tension off the arms, one thing we're going to want to pay attention to before we do that is this pin here. This is your trigger spring pin. This is going to want to fall out. As a matter of fact, before we go any further, mind you, this pin, and then some of the components inside the gun were drilled out with a hammer. So they're going to want to fall out all on their own. It's real fun. You can right now, if you wanted to, work this guy out, but we're not going to. To remove the tension off the arms, we just lift them up with a flathead screwdriver off their posts. Maybe. Maybe. Once again, maybe. Just like that. We'll push it down. We'll flip it over. We'll do the other one. Just like that. And now see that pen's starting to want to walk out. If I hold it here and I wiggle this, it's going to fall right out. We'll just let it do that. Take our pen here. Drop it in our little container. Now what we're going to do, now that all the tension is done, is off the firearm, we're going to start removing the bottom half of the firearm. We have 5 T15 fasteners, 2 in the back that are of equal length. They're the only 2 fasteners out of the 5 that are the same length. And then we have 3 on the bottom. We have a short one here at the top, a medium one here on the left, and then a long one here on the right. We'll just start with the back. Oh, that's wrong driver. And mind you, I recommend the T-handle because you can see here I have a couple wear marks from my bit driver, but this is my gun, so I don't mind doing a little bit of damage. In the future, if you don't want to do damage to your guns, get a T-handle. But either way, we'll take these out. We're going to drop them in our parts container. Get the other one in the back here. These don't have to come apart in any specific order. Now, before we separate the 2 halves, keep in mind there are 2 detents inside the gun. There's one for the cylinder pawl in the back of the top half of the gun. Yeah, I know you safety nuts are watching me put my finger in the trigger well. I need to hold it together. It's a good purchase. But there's 2 detents. There's one that sits in the bottom here on the inside. There's one that sits in the back over here on the top of the gun. It's on the other side. From here, we're going to hold the gun upright. Hammer pin's going to fall out. We'll just drop it in there for now. And we'll separate the 2 halves of the gun like that. Here's that detent I was talking about. This is for your cylinder catch. Just pull that out. The hammer, the mainspring assembly, can just lift up, come right out. And what I'm immediately going to do is I'm going to push this in further. The parts of this are the hammer strut that runs the whole length down to here. We have the mainspring, and we have the mainspring base. We're just going to take this and drop it in there. And now we prematurely have the hammer pen that fell out of the top. And then we have this detent here we're going to immediately pull out. It goes below one of the fastener holes for that go in the back here. We'll just take that out, drop it in there so we don't lose it later. And to conclude the bottom, obviously, the pin that sits here fell out when we removed the tension off the arms. We can just take it and we can pull it out from any direction. Like that. Drop it in there, and that concludes the bottom. The top hammer pin already fell out, and that's okay. I'm actually think I'm going to push that back in because I feel like it makes it a little bit easier and more convenient to disassemble without all the parts not being all Willy Wonka inside there. So the parts that we're looking at here, looking at the top of the firearm, we have the cylinder pawl guide that sits over the pin here. It's not wanting to move around, but yeah, there we go. I got it to slide over towards what looks like the top. We have the trigger, obviously. We have the cylinder catch. And then we have our side gate or loading gate spring slash detent. And I say spring slash detent because it does have a piece of metal that comes up through the top of the firearm here under the side gate that acts as a detent. I'm going to tell you right now, this is a bit of a pain in the butt. And this pin needs to come out this direction. And then when we put it back together, it needs to go this direction. And you're going to want to do it that way because if you look here, see if I can push this pin in a little bit. You can see it's sticking out here on the bottom. There's a machine cutout in that pin. You can see it there at the very top of this flat surface my punch is pushing on. And that cutout is to allow the spring to come in and retain the pin. And basically what we have to do to get this out is we're going to push down on this spring and then start driving the pin this way. We have a secondary roll pin punch because what you could do is you could push on the pin from the inside on the end of it. And what I've been able to do of late is push down on it with my thumb. But this is a pain, and bear with me. And I got it. So as you can see here, the pin caught on the frame, and now you can start to see that cut out, and we'll look at it again here in a second. What's going to happen is as I drive this pin out, this is going to fall into the gun. That is okay. And then when we finally finish driving this out, or pulling this, we're going to pull it out with a pair of pliers now. You just want to put your thumb over this spring here so it doesn't come flying out. So since it's caught on the frame, one of the flat surfaces, basically what we're just going to do, we're going to push down with our thumb, continue walking this out. Or we're going to cause a ruckus. Push it in a little bit. Or not, because this thing hates me. We'll try our punch. There we go. I was pushing down too hard. So now the pin started. The pawl guide hasn't fallen out yet, so we're gonna get that out right now, and we're gonna do a miracle here. This has touched the magnet a few times. We're just gonna touch it. We're gonna pull it out. We got lucky and it didn't fall into the gun. This is your cylinder pawl guide. Move some stuff here. And then from here on out, we can just pull the pin the rest of the way out. And here's our pin. We'll just set it aside here real quick. Here's that cutout that the spring sits in. That retains the pin. We're just going to drop that in there. Now, we're going to take our hammer pen out, and then we're just going to let everything fall out of the gun. Actually, no, we're not. We're not going to do that. We're going to pull these two pieces out. We're going to pull the spring out here, like that. We're going to keep this stuff up here because we're going to go right back into this for reassembly. We're going to grab a plier. We're going to grab this guy here, lift up on it. It'll come right out. And you can see the trigger's all willy-nilly now. That's okay. Set that there. And now we're going to drive our hammer pin out. The hammer pin can go either direction. Like that. And now all this comes out as basically as an assembly. And it's not a fun assembly. Like so. Typically what would happen is all this stuff is going to fall apart. But what we have here for parts, I'll keep it together. Let you look around it. We have our cylinder pawl here. This rotates the cylinder. We'll pull that apart. We have our hammer, obviously. It hits the transfer bar and strikes the transfer bar, strikes the firing pin. We have our transfer bar right here. And we have our trigger. And then this here is your cylinder catch, our side gate spring slash detent. If you look at this, this is the cup here that sits inside that spring that you're depressing to get the pen that you're depressing to get the pen out. And then this is the detent side. This sits up in the side gate and it gives it the pop feel when you open it and close it. And now my least favorite thing on this entire firearm. We have Side gate. This just pulls right out like that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes the disassembly. Now, don't mind my sniffles. For reassembly, you have to put everything how I was holding all of this stuff here. Other than that, how I was holding these 4 pieces here, you want to hold those together when you drop them in the gun. And it is kind of a pain in the butt. Pain in the ass, because I'm serious. But to get this together, we have a hole here and a hole here. This hole here is for your cylinder pawl. And then this hole in the back here is for your transfer bar. So what the transfer bar does is comes up in front of the hammer like so when you pull the trigger, and when the hammer will strike the transfer bar, and the transfer bar is a flat surface that will strike the firing pin. It basically completes the hammer in a sense. And if you look here, there's a cutout, and when you go to lower the hammer, let's say you don't want to fire the gun, if you lower the hammer, you'll hold the hammer back, pull the trigger, and ride the hammer forward a little bit, so it's not going to lock, and then you'll release your trigger, and then when you lower the hammer, the transfer bar is going to recess itself down into the firearm. And I will show you that, because we'll need our pin when we pull the hammer back, because there's a detent on the end of the pin to push back on the transfer bar. To allow it to clear the firing pin that's sticking out of the back of the firearm right here at the top. It'll come up and it'll go flat surface to flat surface, and you can alleviate that by tilting the firearm back and allowing the transfer bar to kind of fall back a little bit, and that'll help. But this pin helps really well. So to reassemble, we'll take our cylinder pawl here. Actually, no, we're not going to do that yet. We're going to do this. I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to, if it does what I think it's going to do, we're just going to roll with it, because I've stopped this video multiple times and reattempted this throughout the week because I constantly mess this up. So there's a flat surface on this right there. The top of this spring needs to go on this side of the flat surface. And sometimes what happens when you're reassembling, this will slide itself out, and then the pin will get caught behind here, or that spring will get caught behind here, and it's a pain in the ass to try to get that back in without completely disassembling the gun. I have not been able to accomplish it, so just pay attention to that so you don't have that headache. It is not a fun headache. All right, now we can get to this stuff. And we will double check that before we drop our spring in. So to get this together, this hole down here on the bottom, oh, and here's that detent that we're not taking out. Take it out, push it in, push the pin out, it'll come out. And then just reverse that, and you'll be able to get that detent back in. Now, for the 85th time, this hole here is for your cylinder pawl. That will go on this side of the hammer. You can see the claw here. Yep, it's very clawy. We're just going to set that down like so. Now we're going to take the trigger, kind of set it down like that, and then our transfer bar is going to go into this hole like that. And you basically set this up in a way how it's going to look inside the firearm. The trigger doesn't look right, that's okay. It looks like it's being pulled and the transfer bar's up, because typically what would happen is when you lower the trigger, it's going to pull that bar out of the way. But we need it sitting up here, and we're going to pinch all this together. I'm going to pinch it all together off camera by sliding it down this way. So, let me get comfortable here. So what we have here is assembly. We want to make sure this is sticking out a little bit, and then the transfer bar is sticking out a little bit, and then obviously the hammer needs to go on the outside of the gun. If the trigger doesn't sit in there right, you can finagle it out and back in. We're going to hold the firearm like this. It's upside down, I know, but obviously the hammer is going to come up and hit the back of the top of the receiver, or not receiver, or the firearm. And I'm using firearm as a general term. We're going to guide the transfer bar and the cylinder pawl into the firearm. We're going to work it in, and then we're just going to drop it like that. back down there like that. And the trigger did fall in perfect. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put our hammer pin in, and that's going to help hold some of the assembly. Hammer pin is pretty simple. Just lift the hammer up. It only goes through the hammer, and then slide it in. And this pin is going to want to walk itself out if you're not paying attention. Now we're going to double check this, and we're going to put our spring and our cylinder catch in. So checking to make sure that this is up against the receiver, we're going to put our finger on it, and then there's a hole. You can see that hole there at the top. That is where the long arm or the detent portion of the spring goes into. Drop that in there. We'll come up here and we'll look at it. And it's wanting to walk behind it. So we're going to try again. And our trigger fell out, and we can fix that. Bear with me here. And there goes our hammer pin again. I put that on backwards. Go me. This is not the most fun firearm I've ever taken apart. I think the worst one I've taken apart other than this is a Marlin Model 19. Those things suck too. But either way, we got it in. And that detent, if you can see it, is where it needs to be. You can kind of see it there sticking up. I'll wiggle this. See it sticking up there, moving around there in front of the cylinder gate, or the side gate. And we're just going to hold that back upside down like this. So nothing else falls out. The cylinder catch will go in like this. And this arm here is going to pivot on the inside of the spring. And then this portion goes in the back. We'll lift the trigger up and drop it in. And then this short arm here is going to go in this hole here next to my finger. We're just going to lift this up a little bit and slide this in. We're going to slide that in there. Got to push it around a little bit, probably with a pair of pliers. We'll pick it up, work that arm in there, like that. And she's in. Kind of see how that goes. We'll lower our trigger back down in there. Let's take a look at that. It'll go between this cutout and the trigger, and then this part of the frame. And then that part of that pin there is going to go inside of that spring. And from here, we're going to start pushing our pin in. Wherever it went. I always turn my table into a mess when I do stuff like this. Pen needs to go in the same direction. The pen needs to go in the direction it came out, or the opposite direction it came out. So we're going to ready our pen. We're going to push down real hard on this spring, and we're good. We got the pen started. And now we're just going to start walking everything around until we start working this pen in. Wiggle it around, and now the trigger. We might overshoot a little bit, and that's okay. We'll just have to work the pen back out because we still need to get our paw guide in. There we go. And we're good enough here. We got it to latch onto this portion here of the frame, and that's okay because it makes it easier to get out, not fighting so much. Work that out just a little bit, and you want some of the pin to stick in there because we're going to use our accidentally magnetized roll pin punch to help us get that in. So the way the firearm is sitting right now, this guide is going to roll this way and then in to the firearm on this side. And we're going to put this hole here of the guide over top of that pin, and then we'll finish pushing our pin in. So to fight this thing for the next 3 hours, we're going to get it on our little magnetized bit here. We're going to let it try to orient itself in the right direction. And we're doing good so far. We're going to work it over that pen. Just like that. The last time I recorded this video, it took me probably 5 minutes to get that. We're going to push our pen back in. And you're going to listen for a snap. And that snap is the spring here locking into that part of that cutout on the pen. We'll set that down for a second. We'll get our detent ready. we'll put our cylinder pawl detent in. Obviously detent goes forward, and that detent is going to go in this hole right here, like that. See it sticking out there. We're going to set that down. Now we're going to grab the bottom part of the frame and we're going to finish that up. And once again, you're going to have pins wanting to fall out and stuff like that. Looky there. I can't find my trigger pin. Or my whatchamapin. Oh, here it is. It's stuck to the mainspring assembly. So we're going to start with the spring, the trigger spring. We're going to take our spring like this. We're going to feed it in through the front of the receiver into this opening here, like so. And then we're going to pay attention to this hole, make sure the hole of the spring goes in good. We're going to hold it up. The pin will go in. I'm going to show you something. The pin will go in and then immediately fall out the other side. But we're going to work that in like that. And we're just going to hold it upright. We have our cylinder pawl, or cylinder catch detent. It's going to go right here in this hole, spring side down. And then we are going to take our main spring. We're going to set this in here real quick. We're going to take our main spring. We're going to work our roll pin punch out a little bit. Be careful not to pull it out too far. Be patient with it. Just so we can clear the frame. Because if this is too long, the roll pin punch will prevent you from clearing the frame and getting this in. So in the orientation of the firearm, like this, put my finger on the back of this here. This is going to go in like this. You can see there's a bit of a cant at the top of the mainspring assembly, or the hammer strut. If you look, when I first took this apart, I put it in backwards, and there's a little bit of a shiny there at the top tip of my thumb between the two spring arms of the trigger spring. That's because I put it in upside down. Don't put it in upside down. The reason I did that is because of how this is angled at the top. And I thought it went the other way. I was wrong. We're going to feed that up in there. Just let the spring base sit on that portion of the frame. And because I did it off camera, we'll do it one more time. Put the top of it up in, and then work that up like that. It's really easy. This is going to fight you when you get the two halves back together, so just be patient. Now, we are going to put the two halves together. The trigger spring at the bottom of the trigger, right there, we're going to put the trigger in and put that spring, let me support this one out funny. We're going to put that spring up above the trigger like that. And then this spring here, we're going to make sure that is flat. You can bend it, and then we're going to work that out of the way. And then everything will pop together. Maybe. Probably doing something wrong. I like to do that. Oh, it's fighting. What's it fighting here? There we go. We got it. Now, I'm going to do the anti-safety thing again. I'm going to stick my finger in the trigger hole just so I can get these two screws started. And then I'm going to raise one of these arms up to put tension on that trigger pin. And those two screws, again, are the only two that are the same length. We'll drop those in there. Grab our T15. And we're going to work them in until they just stop. We're not going to tighten these up yet. Oh, look at that. I already messed up. Thought I was paying attention to it, but obviously not good enough. We're going to re-separate these. Because this damn spring here decided to bend the shit out of it, and I have done that a bunch of times. Look at me go. I like making mistakes. You learn stuff. But not when it starts to make you mad. You don't learn anything. Make sure that is good. And the hammer pen. has to fall out. What do we got going on here? That needs to go up. You can kind of see the frustrations with this firearm. Some of the things you're going to deal with. It's fun to take apart when you're not under the pressure of the camera. But when you're doing it, constantly fighting it, it kind of sucks, especially when you're trying to waste some time here. All right. Now let's try this again. We were fighting the cylinder catch. Right, now for round number 4,287. We're going to try again. Supporting the trigger spring and the hammer, or the trigger pin and the hammer pin. Work these in, paying attention to that stupid detent spring there. Close the hammer. We're going to get that guy right there on that surface. There we go, and we're good. Thumb is in the trigger well. Yes, I know it's not good, but let's be real here. The gun is disassembled, so yeah. And once again, these two holes in the back here, we're going to get the fasteners in. They're the only two fasteners that are the same length. Just to reiterate that one more time. And this you might have to fight too. This will kind of like to stop you from getting everything together. We'll start these. We're just going to do finger and thumb pressure until they stop. So we don't want those super tight yet. We'll tighten everything once we get all the screws in. There we go. Now, while we're here, it's going to hold itself together. We are going to lift up one of these arms over its post. So that way, that we don't have to worry about the trigger pin falling out again. There we go. Now there's spring tension. This pin will not fall out. And we're going to flip it over, get our other three screws. The short screw goes at the top. The long fastener goes on the bottom right. Oh, let me show you this factory quality here. They just removed the threads off of the tip of this screw. The fastener. Put that in. And then the medium one obviously goes in the only hole that's not covered. And we have to drop stuff on the floor in order for this to be a good video. Like that. Same thing, we'll work these in until they stop. Hope you guys are enjoying this cluster of a video. All right, now we can go through and tighten them all. They don't have to be super tight. You will mess the threads up because this isn't made out of like the best materials. I probably could have done it earlier, but we didn't. I'm going to get this one right back up on its post here. The trigger spring arm. And then for the hammer, this is where that pin comes into place. We're going to slide our pin in here, let it lock in, and that's going to push on the transfer bar. We're going to cock our hammer back, make sure that the mainspring base is seated properly on both sides. We're just going to pull this out, and we're going to pull the trigger. And now our mainspring is in. We're pretty much in the clear now after all of that. The reassembly is probably way harder than the disassembly, like most things. Get our ejection rod assembly together. Make sure your fastener's in there because the ejection rod will like to block this fastener. So get the fastener in. Oh, and the spring here. The spring, if you look at the very ends of them, one side is wider than the other. And that is because there's a nice cupped flat, or like a nice flat machine surface in there that this is going to hit up against so it doesn't shoot through. I don't think it'll shoot through the other way. Nope, it won't. But either way, the fat side goes towards the gun. We're going to take our ejection rod here, put our spring into it. We'll slide our ejection rod and spring into the tube. And then the spring will go in, and then we'll push this little surface into here, like that. And now we're just going to find the hole with the fastener, get it started a little bit by hand. We'll tighten that down with a screwdriver. Same thing, it doesn't need to be super tight. Just like that. We're good. Now the grips. Pretty self-explanatory. You only go on one way. Left grip, and then right grip, we're just going to guide that fastener that's still in there in. And then, before I get that together, one thing I need to show you. The factory version of this gun, unless you've bought a fancier one, or the basic version, you can see that this is cracked. There, and it looks like a little bit on top. So this is a captured nut that's in here. It's just super glued in place, I'm pretty sure. You don't want to make that very tight, or obviously you're going to break the plastic. So, yep, slide that over that. And then we'll take our flathead screwdriver again, and we will work that in. Since mine is already broken, we're just going to be careful. We'll go with those a little bit of tension. There we go. I do eventually plan on getting new grips for this thing, but it was like $200, so I don't really care that much. Well, now we're back to field strip state. We have just the pen, the cylinder pen, and the cylinder. And get that together. Open the side gate. Take our cylinder. You'll see here the notch side that the cylinder pawl engages onto. To rotate the cylinder goes towards the back, and then the smooth part goes in the front. We'll just drop it in, and then we'll wiggle it around until we get the pen in place. Put your index finger on the tip of the pen, push up on the bottom of the button with your middle finger, and go till it snaps in place. Give it a little tug to be sure. Close it, turn the cylinder till it finds its first lock. Now we're just going to do a little functions check. Pretty easy. Cock the hammer back and make sure the cylinder rotates. And obviously the trigger pulls. Now what we're going to look at is the transfer bar. So when you squeeze the trigger, the transfer bar comes up. When you lower the hammer, that's going to strike. And one thing you want to listen for is a little click. That click is basically the transfer bar sliding out from the back of the firing pin, and then the firing pin popping back out. And one thing we could do too is make sure it lowers, which we already know it lowers based off the sound, but pull the trigger, start to lower the hammer, and remove your finger. And you'll see that transfer bar move up and down. And then the firing pin will sit in the recess of the hammer. Well, that concludes the disassembly and reassembly of the video. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe and share and comment and tell me how bad of a job I've done. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again in the future.